At 11:40 on a Tuesday night in Chicago, a 27-year-old cleaner named Bella Kovalchuk was handed a stack of fresh towels and told to bring them up to the penthouse of the Thornbury, and the woman handing them over was shaking. 3 days earlier, Bella had sat in a plastic chair at a hospital and listened to a stranger tell her that her mother's body would stay in that morgue until somebody paid the balance. She had a degree she'd never been allowed to use, a night shift badge, and a mother she couldn't bury. So when Deborah grabbed her arm and said, "Do you know whose room that is nobody in this city says the name Draycott out loud? They write it down and burn the paper." Bella took the towels anyway. Lucas Draycott was 37 years old, and he ran everything that moved through the port of Chicago that nobody was supposed to see moving. He didn't shout, he didn't threaten, he never had to. People who disappointed Lucas Draycott didn't get hurt, they just quietly stopped existing in their own lives. Lost the license, lost the lease, lost the name. Half the men in that city crossed the street when his car pulled up, and the other half were already working for him and didn't know it yet. And that night, it was the anniversary of the fire he had survived as a child, the night he had lost the only family he had ever known. He was sitting alone in the dark with half a bottle of Macallan gone, looking at a woman in a cleaner's uniform the way a man looks at a patch of ground he's deciding whether to dig. "Why are you shaking?" he asked her. "I'm not, sir, you are, and I know exactly why you're really here." And then he was drunk enough and cruel enough to say the ugliest thing he'd ever said to another human being. "Name your price." Now, here's the thing nobody in that room understood yet. Bella didn't run. She didn't cry. She stood in that doorway with clean towels in her arms, and she gave him a number that wasn't round, not 50,000, not 100. She gave him a number that was exact down to the last dollar, because that's precisely what it cost to bury the only person on this earth who'd ever loved her. And something in that man's face shifted. Because in his business, liars round up. Liars always round up. She walked out of that hotel at sunrise with the money in her account and a rule ringing in her ears: don't mistake this for anything else. Don't cling, don't come back. And she believed him. She believed it was over. Clean, ugly, finished. It wasn't. Because a few weeks later, something happened to Bella Kovalchuk that no amount of money could fix, no contract could cover, and no man in Chicago, not even the one who owned it, could make quietly stop existing. If you're still with us, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps this channel more than you know. Share it with somebody who loves a story that won't let go. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, so you don't miss where this one lands. Now, let's go back to that penthouse corridor, where a girl with an armful of clean towels is about to knock on the wrong door. He said nothing more after naming his price. He simply set his glass down on the low table and waited, and in that silence, Bella could hear the steady hum of the air conditioner inside the wall, could hear the beating of her own heart, and she understood that if she took even one step back now, her mother would remain in that refrigerated drawer for another week, another month, perhaps forever. He picked up a phone, not an ordinary one, but something thinner and older, and opened a banking application whose interface looked unlike anything she had ever seen. "Which bank?" he asked. "Fifth Third," she said. "Name Bella O. Kovalchuk." He didn't type. He looked at her. "Say it again." She repeated it more slowly. "Fifth Third Bank, Bella O. Kovalchuk." He still didn't type. "Say it one more time." And by the third time, something inside her cracked a little, not from fear, but because she suddenly understood what he was doing. He was waiting for her to stumble, waiting for her to correct a letter, waiting for that moment when someone inventing a story always had to correct themselves. "Fifth Third Bank," she said, her voice flat as stone. "Bella O. Kovalchuk." The O stands for Oksana. That was the temporary name my mother registered for me when she first took me in, before she officially changed it to Bella, because she said I deserved a beautiful name. He typed. 4 seconds. 5. Then he turned the screen toward her, and there it was, that exact amount down to the final dollar, waiting in an unconfirmed transfer order. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Look at me." And she did. She looked directly at a man whose name this entire city didn't dare speak, and she thought, "This is the only way. This is the only way. There isn't another door in my life that will open. And every door I have ever knocked on has been slammed shut in my face." "I'm sure," she said. He pressed confirm. There was no sound at all. No chime, no vibration, only a small line of text changing from gray to green, and just like that, $49,200 left an account whose name she would never know and entered hers. and a woman lying in the Cook County Hospital morgue had just been granted permission to go home. Bella stood there and felt no relief. She felt something else, something it would take her years to name. Something suspended between gratitude and revulsion, and it wasn't directed at him. It was directed at the world that had arranged things, so this had become the most reasonable choice she had. "Sit down," he said. It didn't sound like an order. It sounded almost weary. She sat on the edge of the sofa, her hands still clasped tightly together as though she were still holding a stack of towels that wasn't there. "Don't mistake this for anything else," he said. "I don't like noise. I don't like people who cling. I won't remember your name after today, and you won't mention mine anywhere, to anyone, not even inside your own head." "I don't intend to cling," she said. "I don't intend to trouble you. I just need to bury my mother. That's all." He looked at her for a very long time, long enough that she began to think she had said something wrong. And then he stood, crossed the room, and opened the top drawer of the cabinet beside the bed. Bella didn't follow him with her eyes. She looked down at the floor, at the border of the rug, and counted the threads there because it was the only thing in her life, at that moment, that she could control. And she would remember this room, and the threads of that rug, 7 months later, in a brightly lit examination room at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, when a woman in a white coat would ask her whether she had kept the blister pack of the medicine she had been given. And Bella would say no, and it would be the most expensive answer she had ever given in her life. At 6:41 in the morning, Bella opened her eyes, and the first thing she did wasn't remember where she was. It was count. The front door, the balcony door, the bathroom door, 3 ways out, and she was lying 11 steps from the nearest one, and she knew that number before she even had time to wonder why she knew it. There was nothing on her body except a thin blanket draped loosely over her, and her clothes had been folded neatly on the armchair, more neatly than she had ever folded anything in her life, and that careful precision sent a deeper chill down her spine than if they had been scattered carelessly across the floor. He stood beside the wall of glass that stretched from floor to ceiling, bare from the waist up, his back turned to her as he looked down at Lake Michigan, which had become a vast sheet of gray with no horizon. There was a glass in his hand, not coffee, not water. Whiskey, 1/3 of a glass, and outside it was only just light enough to see the fog. He didn't turn around. "You counted, didn't you?" he said. Bella didn't answer. She pulled the blanket higher and sat up, and she understood at once that he wasn't looking down at the water. He was watching her through his reflection in the glass, and he had been watching that way since before she opened her eyes. "Counted what, sir?" she said. "Doors," he said. "The moment you woke up, you counted how many ways there were out. You did it before you remembered my name." She remained silent, he said. "Every morning. For 25 years, and he said it in the tone people used to speak about the weather, without the slightest trace of self-pity, and that was why it remained with her for years afterward, that number 25, lodged inside her like a pebble, in a shoe she could never find and remove. "I'll leave now," she said. "The money reached your account at 5:03, he said. "You can check before you walk out the door. I trust you," she said. And for the first time, he stayed silent long enough for her to hear the ice shift inside his glass. "Don't," he said. "That's the most expensive mistake in this city." Bella stood, still clutching the blanket around herself, and walked to the armchair, and she put her uniform back on, with a calmness that surprised even her, because she had already passed through this night, had already reached the other side of it, and the worst part wasn't what had happened. It was knowing that she would have to carry it through the rest of her life like a second name. "Is there anything else you want?" he asked, still without turning around. "No, sir. Everyone wants more," he said, taking a sip. "You will too." "You don't know anything about me," she said, and that was the first time he turned around. He looked directly at her, no longer through the glass, and for one brief moment, he didn't look like a man whose name the entire city wrote on paper and then burned. He looked like a man drowning in old ghosts and a bottle of whiskey before 7 in the morning. "No," he said, "I don't." Still deeply intoxicated and barely seeing straight, he crossed the room and pulled open the cabinet drawer, grabbing a small pill from a loose tray without looking. When he returned, a small white pill rested in his palm, round and no larger than a pea. It was a loose pill, left behind by his grandmother in the medicine tray days ago, stripped of its original blister packaging. "Take this," he said. Bella looked at it. "What is it?" she asked. "Medicine," he said. What kind of medicine? He only looked at her, and in the cold morning light there was nothing on his face, and he said, "Do you want trouble?" "No, sir," she said. "Then take it." And Bella took the pill, placed it on her tongue, and swallowed it with the water he handed her, asking no more questions, because desperate people didn't have the right to ask questions. And one small white pill wasn't worth arguing over. He put the blister pack back into the drawer and pushed it closed with his knee. Bella picked up her handbag. She didn't say thank you, and later she would think about that for a very long time, that she hadn't thanked him, and that she was glad she hadn't. There was only one sentence in her mind, repeating over and over like a prayer she no longer believed in but still recited. "Mama, I'm bringing you home today." She crossed the room, and on the low table beside the door lay a watch, its glass face turned upward, the leather strap slightly worn around the third hole, and she walked past it without even glancing down. The door closed very softly behind her. Lucas Draycott remained where he was for a long while. Then he looked at the low table. The watch was still lying exactly where he had deliberately placed it the night before, in the most visible spot in the room, in the place where anyone leaving would have to pass it, and he hadn't put it there through carelessness. He had placed it there because it was a test he had used for 15 years, and not one person had ever failed it in this direction. She didn't take the watch, he thought. It was right there on the table. Everyone takes it. Then he finished the whiskey remaining in his glass, and that was a mistake, because for the next 5 weeks, he would think of that woman exactly once every morning, at 6:41, when he stood beside that wall of glass and counted the doors. 4 days later, on a Saturday morning washed in pale sunlight, Helena Kovalchuk was lowered into the earth at the cemetery behind St. Nicholas Church in Ukrainian Village, and 6 people stood there. Bella counted them, because she counted everything, and that number hurt her more than the coffin did. 6 people for a woman who had worked for 38 years in this country. Mrs. Frida Melnick, 71 years old, her mother's closest friend, and nearly the only one she had left, cried from beginning to end with the quiet grief of someone who had already buried too many people. No wailing, no sobbing, only tears flowing steadily down into the collar of her black coat, and she didn't bother to wipe them away. There were 2 former neighbors from the building on Chicago Street. There was a young woman Bella had never met, someone her mother had once cared for during the night shift at the nursing home, and whom Bella would never see again. And there was a man no one knew, dressed in a long coat, standing apart from everyone else, who left before the pastor had finished reading the final prayer, and later, when Bella tried to remember his face, she couldn't remember anything at all. Pastor Elias Burkhart, 68 years old, conducted the service more slowly than necessary, and he did it deliberately. He recited the prayers in both English and Ukrainian, and when he reached the Ukrainian passages, Bella heard her mother's voice inside them, the way she pressed weight onto the final syllables, the way those words rested heavily in the mouth like pebbles, and Bella had to bite the inside of her cheek to remain standing. She hadn't cried once in 4 days. She had signed papers, paid $43,000 to Cook County Hospital, and $6,200 to the funeral home, chosen a pine coffin because her mother had hated extravagance, stood at the reception counter while a woman asked whether she wanted to upgrade to a silk lining, and answered, "No, thank you. My mother slept on a foam mattress for 38 years. She hadn't cried anywhere during those 4 days. She had only paid, and now, standing there, she understood something terrible. She had spent those 4 days doing one thing, and now that thing was finished, and there was nothing left to do. And it was that nothing left to do that would kill her. After everyone had drifted away, Pastor Burkhart remained beside her at the fresh grave. He didn't say the things people usually said. He didn't tell her that her mother was in a better place. Didn't say time would heal. And Bella was more grateful to him for that than for anything else he had done that morning. "Your mother was a stubborn woman," he said. "She argued theology with me for 17 years and never yielded a single step." Bella laughed, a short, dry sound, the first laugh to leave her in 4 days. "She told me you recited the prayers too quickly," she said. "I know," he replied. "She told me to my face, twice." Then he fell silent for a moment, and when he spoke again, there was something different in his voice. "Bella," he said, "your mother left something with me." Bella looked at him. Her mind was empty then in the particular way it becomes empty after 3 sleepless nights, the kind of emptiness where sounds enter but have nowhere to settle. Something, father, she said. She gave it to me many years ago, he said. She told me to keep it. She told me to wait until you were strong enough. He looked at her, at the dark circles beneath her eyes, at the two hands still clenched together as though they hadn't opened once in 4 days, and he said, I don't think today is that day. And Bella nodded. That was all. She nodded, said, yes, father, thank you, and she didn't ask what it was. Didn't ask why her mother had given it to an outsider instead of to her own daughter. Didn't ask what strong enough meant, or how strong she would have to become. Because by then there wasn't a single question left inside Bella Kovalchuk. She had spent them all at the hospital reception counter. She had used her final question on a white pill in a room on the top floor of the Thornbury Hotel, and the answer she had received had taught her that asking was a luxury she couldn't afford. Pastor Burkhart watched her walk toward the cemetery gate, and he stood there for a very long time. And inside the desk drawer in his office, beneath 2 baptism ledgers, lay a yellowed paper envelope that had remained untouched for 25 years, and it would remain there for nearly another year. 5 weeks later, Bella Kovalchuk received a call at 9 o'clock in the morning from a landline number in the Loop, and the woman on the other end asked whether she could come in for an interview on Thursday afternoon. Bella had submitted 142 job applications over 4 years and received 9 calls, so she didn't dare hope. She only asked for the address and wrote it in pencil on the back of an electric bill. The interview lasted 11 minutes. They asked her about accounting standards, about procedures for reviewing suspicious transactions, and she answered everything, answered smoothly, because she had learned those things through scholarships and night shifts, and she had reviewed them alone for 4 years with no one to talk to. They didn't ask what she had been doing during those 4 years. That was the first strange thing, but Bella needed the job too badly to stop over one strange thing. 3 days later, she received the offer letter. Compliance analyst. Entry level, 31st floor, the building on Wacker Street. Starting salary, $78,000 a year. More than everything she had ever earned put together. She read the letter 4 times in her one-room apartment while sitting on the floor, and then she buried her face against her knees and cried for the first time since the funeral, not because she was happy, but because her mother had died exactly 5 weeks before this day and would never know. On Monday morning, she arrived 40 minutes early. The lobby rose 3 stories high, all stone and glass, and she stood in the middle of it wearing a suit she had bought at a thrift store on Milwaukee Street, feeling like someone borrowing another person's life. The person showing her around was a young man named Benny Faulkner, 29 years old, from the Information Technology Department, who spoke quickly, spoke constantly, and seemed genuinely delighted to have someone new to talk to. He gave her an access card, showed her where the coffee was, explained why the elevators in Section C were always breaking down, and as they walked along the hallway on the 31st floor, he said, "Oh right, there's a mandatory orientation at 2 o'clock this afternoon." "Actually mandatory?" Bella asked. "Actually mandatory," Benny said. "The chief executive officer hardly ever comes in because he travels constantly, but new employees have to attend. No exceptions." Bella nodded, opened her notebook, and asked the most ordinary question an ordinary person could ask on the first day of a new job. "What's the chief executive officer's name?" Benny laughed, the kind of laugh people gave when they thought the other person was joking. "Draycott, of course," he said. "Lucas Draycott." "What do you think this building is called?" Bella stopped. Not that her feet stopped moving, but something inside her stopped completely, like a machine unplugged in the middle of running, and for those 2.5 seconds, she couldn't hear anything Benny said, couldn't hear the photocopier, couldn't hear anything at all. Draycott. She had stood in the dark and listened to a man tell her to name her price. She had read her bank account information to him 3 times. Fifth Third Bank, Bella O. Kovalchuk. The O stands for Oksana. That was the name my mother meant to give me before she changed her mind. She had said that. She had stood there and willingly spoken those words aloud. He had made her repeat them 3 times so he would remember. That was the entire point of making someone say something 3 times. "Are you all right?" Benny asked. Bella heard her own voice say, "Yes, I'm fine. I just haven't eaten breakfast." And she heard Benny laugh and say, "No one here does." And she heard herself laugh with him, and she thought, "I have to quit. I have to quit today, right now, before 2 o'clock. Then she thought about $78,000 a year. She thought about 4 years and 142 applications. She thought about how her mother had scrubbed other people's floors, so Bella could earn the degree that had lain in a drawer for 4 years without anyone caring enough to look at it. And she thought, he is the chief executive officer of a corporation with 4,000 employees, and I am a new hire on the 31st floor. He will never see me. He doesn't even know I exist. He told me he wouldn't remember my name after that day. He said it, with his own mouth. Bella drew in a breath and told Benny to keep going. They reached the end of the corridor, where the executive elevators were, and Benny was halfway through a story about the coffee machine when a soft chime sounded, and the steel doors in front of them slid open. Lucas Draycott stood inside. He looked directly at her, and not a single muscle in his face moved. He stepped out of the elevator, walked past her, and said nothing. No nod, no second glance, nothing at all, and that nothing was more frightening than anything he could have done. Benny whispered that he had never stood that close to him before, his voice carrying the excitement of someone who had just seen a wild animal through glass, while Bella stood there with both hands beginning to tremble, and she pushed them into the pockets of her jacket. The 2 o'clock orientation took place without him. During her first 3 weeks, Bella worked 11 hours a day and spoke no more than 5 sentences to anyone. She reviewed transaction reports, cross-checked vendor records, and she worked quickly, cleanly, better than anyone expected from a new hire, and that was precisely her mistake. Had she performed at an average level, perhaps no one would have noticed. The person who noticed was Rhiannon Vespucci, 31 years old, the chief executive officer's executive assistant, a woman dressed with precision down to the last millimeter, and blessed with a voice so pleasant that it took people a moment to realize they had just been cut. It happened on a Wednesday morning in the shared kitchen on the 31st floor, when about 9 people were standing around waiting for the coffee machine. Vespucci walked in holding her cup and addressed the entire room in the tone of someone making casual conversation. "Miss Kovalchuk," she said, "I looked at your file. University of Illinois, Chicago. Correct." Bella said yes. Vespucci nodded thoughtfully. "Interesting," she said, "because Draycott doesn't hire people from public universities, never has. I have sat in this chair for 4 years, and I have never seen a file like yours come through. So I'm simply curious, who sponsored you?" The room went silent, no one left. That was what Bella remembered most afterward, not the question, but the fact that not one of those 9 people walked away. "No one sponsored me," Bella said. "I applied." Vespucci smiled. "Of course," she said, and walked out. By that afternoon the rumor had traveled through all 3 floors. By the following day it had taken shape. Bella heard it for the first time in the women's restroom, 2 voices coming from the stall beside hers, and one of them said the sentence she would hear over and over again inside her head for months afterward. "I heard she used to be a cleaner, at a hotel, then suddenly she ends up here. How do you think that happened?" Bella remained motionless inside her stall until they left. She didn't cry. She washed her hands, looked into the mirror, and thought, "They're right." That was the worst part. And she knew it in that very moment, standing before the mirror while the faucet was still running. They had guessed blindly, and they had guessed correctly. She had slept with that man. She had taken his money. The fact that she had done it for her mother, the fact that she had recited her account information 3 times in a voice flat as stone and hadn't begged for a single thing, the fact that she hadn't known who he was and hadn't applied for this job through him, none of it mattered in the story they were telling, because the story they were telling was shorter and easier to remember. She worked 4 more days that way, her head lowered, keeping close to the walls, and she began eating lunch in the emergency stairwell. The following Tuesday, Vespucci did it again, this time in the open office area, this time louder, and this time she was holding Bella's review report in her hand. "This is quite good," she said. "Good enough to make me wonder who helped you write it." Bella didn't answer. She had learned that answering only gave people another length of rope with which to bind her. And at that exact moment, Lucas Draycott walked past. He didn't stop. He only slowed by half a step, and he said, without looking at anyone, his voice as calm as if he were reading out a number, "Vespucci, if you have enough free time to interview personnel on my behalf, I'll find more work for you." Then he kept walking. The entire open office fell silent. Someone lowered their eyes to a keyboard and pretended to type. Someone else turned completely away, and Bella, Standing there felt no relief. She felt something cold move down her spine, because she understood that he had just thrown her into the center of the stage, rather than pulled her away from it. But there was something else. Bella looked at Vespucci. And Vespucci didn't blush. She didn't lower her eyes. There wasn't the slightest trace of someone who had just been humiliated by the chief executive officer in front of 20 people. She simply placed the report on the desk, smoothed it flat with one precise motion, and watched his back disappear with the expression of someone taking notes. 2 weeks later, Bella Kovalchuk collapsed onto the floor of the photocopy room on the 31st floor at 10:20 on Thursday morning, and the person who found her was Benny Faulkner, who had been passing by to pick up printer paper. She woke in the ambulance with an oxygen mask over her face and a paramedic asking when she had last eaten, and it took her a long moment to remember. Northwestern Memorial Hospital. They started her on intravenous fluids, drew blood, and told her to remain still. Bella lay there staring at the ceiling and calculating. One sick day during her 5th week on the job, Vespucci would have something to talk about for an entire month. She was trying to decide how she would explain it when there was a knock at the door, and a woman in a white coat stepped inside. 34 years old, her hair tied neatly back, carrying a thin file. "Hello, I'm Dr. Quinn Abernathy," she said. "Obstetrics and gynecology." Bella looked at her without understanding. "I think there's been a mistake," she said. "I only fainted." "There's no mistake," Dr. Abernathy said, pulling a chair closer and sitting at eye level instead of standing over her. "Miss Kovalchuk, your blood test results are back. You're pregnant. About 7 weeks." Bella heard every word clearly, and not one of them went in. "That's impossible," she said. Dr. Abernathy said nothing. "That's impossible," Bella repeated, and her voice began to break in the middle. "He gave me a pill. That same night. He gave me a pill and I took it." "Do you still have the blister pack?" Dr. Abernathy asked. "No. Did you see it? The name on the package, any markings on the pill, anything at all?" Bella closed her eyes and tried to remember, and what she remembered was a palm, a small white pill, and a rug whose threads she had been counting. "White," she said. "Round. Small. No bigger than a pea." Dr. Abernathy was silent for a moment. "Miss Kovalchuk," she said, her voice unchanged, "there are a great many things in this world that are white, round, and small." "He told me it was medicine," Bella said. Dr. Abernathy nodded slowly. "Vitamins are medicine too," she said. Bella sat perfectly still. She didn't cry. She only sat there watching the intravenous fluid drip, thinking about the drawer beside the bed, about the way he had pushed it closed with his knee, about the absolute indifference in that movement, and she understood something that turned her cold. That man hadn't lied to her at all. He had truly believed it was birth control. He had told her not to cling, not to come back, and he had believed he had purchased that night outright and sealed it shut. If she went to him now with this news, there would be only one explanation in his mind, and that explanation already had a name, and the entire building had been repeating it for 2 weeks in the women's restroom. "I want to terminate the pregnancy," Bella said. Dr. Abernathy didn't react. She only opened the file and said, "All right, I'm going to tell you what you need to know. In Illinois, this is legal. There is no mandatory waiting period and no one's consent is required except yours. At 7 weeks, you have 2 options, medication or a procedure, and I will explain both." Then she did exactly that, slowly and thoroughly, including the parts Bella didn't want to hear. She talked about risks, talked about percentages, said that most cases involved no complications, but complications still existed, and Bella had the right to know the numbers. She didn't say a single word about morality. She didn't ask who the father was. She didn't ask why. And it was that absence of questions that nearly made Bella collapse, because for the first time in 7 weeks, someone in that room was treating her like an adult who had the right to decide what happened to her own life. "Would you like to go home and think about it?" Dr. Abernathy asked. "No," Bella said. "Would you like to speak with a counselor? Completely free of charge, and it doesn't have to be today." "No," Bella said. "All right," Dr. Abernathy said, writing in the file. "The earliest appointment is this Sunday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You will need to pay in advance and arrive 30 minutes early." "Sunday," Bella said. 2 o'clock. On her way out, in the 4th floor corridor, she stopped beside a plastic chair and had to sit down because her legs refused to carry her any farther, and she remained there for a very long time, thinking, "Mama, I just buried you. I only just buried you." Bella was still sitting on that plastic chair with both hands covering her face when she heard a bag fall to the floor about 33 feet away, followed immediately by a woman saying, "Damn it," in the irritated voice of someone angry with her own body, rather than with anyone else. Bella looked up. An elderly woman was gripping the handrail along the wall, wearing pearls and a dark blue wool coat, her silver hair arranged with great care, and she was slowly sinking toward the floor in the manner of someone who knew she was about to fall and was trying to do it with dignity. Two people walked past. Both quickened their steps. Bella rose, wiped her face with the back of her hand, and went over. She caught the woman by the elbow, helped her onto the chair, and the old woman immediately said, "I'm fine, I'm perfectly fine. I simply stood up too quickly." Bella looked at the color of her lips, watched the way she was breathing, and said, "Mom, may I see your medication?" "I have no reason to show you my medication," the old woman said. "I know," Bella said, and remained sitting quietly beside her. The old woman studied her for 3 seconds, then gave an extremely theatrical sigh and pushed her handbag toward her. Inside were 6 blister packs of pills, a worn leather wallet, and a small notebook containing a medication schedule written in the elegant slanted handwriting of someone who had been taught penmanship in the 1940s. Bella read every package, then she read the notebook. Then she looked up. "You take Lasix and metoprolol at the same time in the morning?" she asked. "So what?" the old woman said. "They're both morning medications. That's what the doctor wrote." "The doctor wrote that both should be taken in the morning. He didn't write that they should be taken together," Bella said. "You need to separate them by at least 2 hours. Lasix removes fluid. Metoprolol slows your heart rate. When you take them on top of each other, your blood pressure drops, then you stand up, then you collapse in a hospital hallway and tell yourself it happened because you rose too quickly." The old woman fell silent. Then she looked Bella up and down with the blunt appraisal of an elderly woman, who had no time for politeness. "Are you a nurse?" she asked. "No," Bella said. "My mother was ill for 4 years. I memorized everything." The word "ill" remained between them for a moment. The old woman didn't ask anything else. She only said, "Then where is she now?" And Bella answered, "I buried my mother 7 weeks ago, Mom." And the old woman gave one brief nod and said, "I see." And she didn't say any of the things people usually said, and Bella had to turn her face away. The old woman insisted on standing. Bella told her to remain seated for another 5 minutes. The old woman told Bella not to order her around, because she had been standing up by herself for 84 years. Then she rose, and as she did, she swayed and struck Bella's shoulder, and Bella, who hadn't eaten since the previous evening, who was 7 weeks pregnant, stumbled backward 2 steps and had to brace one hand against the wall. It happened in 2 seconds, but the old woman saw it. Her eyes widened and she said, "Good heavens, I've just knocked over a young woman." "Mom, that isn't what happened," Bella said. "I've just knocked over a young woman in the middle of a hospital," the old woman said, growing louder with every word, and people began turning to look. "I'm only tired," Bella said. "I haven't eaten breakfast." "You're as white as paper," the old woman said. "You nearly fainted. I've caused an accident." "There was no accident, Mom." "Young lady," the old woman said, straightening herself, and in that moment she seemed far taller than her small body. "In my family, people take responsibility. They don't walk away and pretend nothing happened. I struck you, you nearly fell, and I'm not going to stand here arguing with you about it." Bella was about to speak again when the old woman pulled out her phone, a flip phone, and began dialing with her index finger slowly, one button at a time. "Doreen," she said into the phone, "call the car." "No, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm taking someone home." "Mom," Bella said, "I have somewhere I need to be." "Where?" the old woman asked. Bella opened her mouth and nothing came out. She couldn't say, "I have an appointment on Sunday at 2 o'clock. She couldn't say, "I've just learned that I'm 7 weeks pregnant by a man who paid me money." She stood there, 27 years old, in the 4th floor corridor, and there wasn't a single lie left inside her. "You see," the old woman said, her voice suddenly much gentler, "you have nowhere to be. Come along." Then she linked her arm through Bella's, not to lean on her, but to hold her there, and she said, "My name is Constance." Bella fell asleep in the car. She hadn't meant to, but the back seat was warm, and she hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night in 7 weeks. And when she opened her eyes, the car was traveling along a road lined with old oak trees, with the city nowhere in sight. "Lake Forest," the driver said when she asked. 30 miles north. The house appeared beyond a bend in the road, and Bella looked at it and thought, This isn't a house, this is something people build to prove a point. A woman of about 60 named Doreen came out to meet them, already holding a thin blanket, and spoke to Constance in the voice of someone who had been arguing with her for 20 years and had never won once. They settled Bella onto the living room sofa. They gave her a cup of tea and a plate of something hot, and Bella ate every bite, ashamed of how quickly she finished it. Constance sat across from her, watching, and said nothing for 15 full minutes, because that was how she made other people speak. But Bella said nothing. Bella was calculating which bus she would have to take home, how many hours the journey would cost her, and how she would explain her sick day to Vespucci tomorrow. Then the door opened. Bella heard the footsteps before she saw the person, and she recognized them immediately, though she had heard them only once in her life, in a corridor on the 31st floor. Lucas Draycott entered the living room, removing his overcoat, and stopped. He looked at her. Then he looked at the old woman. "Grandmother," he said, "why is she here?" "This is the girl I told you about," Constance said. "When did you tell me about her?" "I'm telling you now," Constance said, and took a sip of tea. Bella stood. "I should be going," she said. "Sit down," Constance said. Lucas Draycott said nothing more to his grandmother. He merely stood there, and inside his mind there was a single sentence repeating like a broken clock. "She got into my house in 7 weeks. 7 weeks. Faster than the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He had turned this house into a fortress no one could enter unless he allowed it. He had run background checks on even the man who cut the grass, and a girl he had paid for one drunken night was now sitting on his grandmother's living room sofa, eating a meal Doreen had prepared. "Go and rest," he said. "I'll take her home." Constance studied her grandson for a long moment, then rose and said, "Don't be rude," before walking out, moving more slowly than necessary in precisely the way an 84-year-old woman was entitled to move. The two of them were left alone. Lucas Draycott didn't sit. "How much?" he said. Bella looked up. "Excuse me. How much did my grandmother pay you?" he said, "to perform that little scene at the hospital? Or did you invent it yourself? Because I have to admit, it was good. The part about the medication, the part about my mother being sick for 4 years, very good. People pay screenwriters to produce things worse than that." Bella stood. She hadn't eaten anything for 2 days before today. She had just learned that she was 7 weeks pregnant. She had an appointment on Sunday at 2 o'clock that she hadn't told another living soul about. And she looked directly at that man and said, "You really are an asshole." The room went silent. Lucas Draycott stood perfectly still. Then something very small happened on his face. Not a smile, not quite, but something at the corner of his eyes. Something Bella would have missed had she not been looking straight at him. "That's the first honest thing you've said to me since that night," he said. Bella picked up her bag. "You know nothing about me," she said. "You haven't asked me a single question. You only named a price, then you paid me, then you told me not to cling, and I didn't cling. I didn't apply for that job through you. I didn't know that building belonged to you until my first day at work. And I didn't know that old woman was your grandmother until you walked through that door." He looked at her. "You would say that," he said. "Yes," Bella said. "I would say that, because it's the truth. And I know you won't believe me, and I don't need you to believe me, because I'm leaving now, and you will never have to see my face again." She walked toward the door, and Lucas Draycott, a man who had never needed to do anything to obtain whatever he wanted, stood in the middle of his grandmother's living room, and realized that he didn't want her to leave. Bella didn't make it to the door. Constance was already standing there, leaning against the doorframe, and behind her stood a thin, silver-haired man in a gray suit carrying a briefcase, someone Bella had never met, and who looked as though he had been standing there for quite some time. "This is Nils Brantvedt," Constance said, "my family's attorney for 41 years. She sat down in her armchair, picked up her cup of tea, and spoke to him in the tone people used when ordering a meal. "Bring out the papers, Nils." Lucas Draycott didn't move. "What papers?" he said. Mr. Brantvedt opened the briefcase and placed 2 sets of documents on the table. The first was thick, bound, with a notarized seal in one corner. The second consisted of only 2 printed pages. "A prenuptial agreement," he said, his voice as even as if he were reading the weather. "Drafted under Illinois law and fully reviewed. And this is an application for a Cook County marriage license. Both parties must appear in person. No one may sign on their behalf." Bella looked at the 2 sets of papers and couldn't understand what any of them had to do with her. "Grandmother," Lucas said, And for the first time that evening, something in his voice changed. Are you joking? Have I ever joked about responsibility? Constance said. I'm not marrying anyone. Tomorrow morning, Constance said, ignoring her grandson. 9 o'clock. Daily Center. Cook County Clerk's Office. Both of you. Bring identification. Wait the required 1 day, then have the ceremony there. There's no need for anything elaborate. I've already called them. You called whom? Lucas said. Bella laughed. It was a short, broken sound with nothing joyful in it, and it escaped before she could stop it. Mom, she said. He and I don't even know each other. Young lady, Constance said. I'm not asking where or how the two of you met. I'm 84 years old. I don't have time for questions whose answers won't change anything. I know what I saw. I fell in a hospital corridor, and 2 people walked past me as though they were passing a chair. You were the third. You were crying, and you still stopped. I stopped because I know how to read medication labels, Bella said. That doesn't mean anything. It means something to me, Constance said. Grandmother, Lucas said. She is my employee. She works on the 31st floor. Do you understand how this looks? I don't care how it looks, Constance said. I've lived long enough to outgrow caring about appearances. Bella stood there and watched the two of them toss her life back and forth like a ball, and she felt something rising in her chest. Not anger, but something older and more exhausted than anger. She thought about 7 weeks. She thought about the 6 people at the cemetery. She thought about the plastic chair in the 4th floor corridor 5 hours earlier. She thought about Sunday. Enough, she said. No one heard her. Mr. Brantvet was explaining the separate property provisions. Lucas was saying something about the board of directors. And Constance was saying that the board could take care of itself. And Bella heard her own voice rise. Louder than she had intended. Louder than anything she had said in the past 7 weeks. I'm pregnant. The room stopped. It didn't merely fall silent. It stopped like a film caught between 2 frames. Constance was holding her teacup. The cup slipped from her hand and shattered on the hardwood floor. And no one moved. No one looked down. Not one of the 4 people in that room glanced toward the sound of breaking porcelain. Mr. Brantvet stood motionless, with a sheet of paper in his hand. Bella looked directly at Lucas Draycott, and he looked back at her, and the silence stretched so long that Bella heard the grandfather clock in the hallway outside strike the half-hour. Whose is it? He said. He said it very softly. There was no anger in his voice. There was nothing in it at all, and it was that nothing which, later, whenever Bella remembered that evening, hurt her more than everything he had said to her at the Thornbury Hotel. Constance turned toward her grandson very slowly. Bella didn't answer his question. She looked at him, then at the old woman, then down at the broken pieces of porcelain on the floor, and she said the only sentence she still had left inside her. I have an appointment this Sunday. Constance told Mr. Brantvet to leave. He closed his briefcase and walked out without saying a word, and Bella understood that in 41 years he had witnessed things worse than this, and had learned how not to be present inside them. Doreen came in to sweep up the broken porcelain. Constance wouldn't allow it. Leave it, she said, and Doreen looked at her for 1 second before walking out. Sit down, young lady, Constance said. Bella sat. Her legs no longer had another choice. The old woman didn't speak at once. She sat there staring at the shattered porcelain on the hardwood floor, and when she finally opened her mouth, her voice was completely different from the one she used to order meals, issue commands, and argue with Doreen. I have heart failure, she said. Stage D. If you know medication by heart, then you know what the letter D means. Bella knew. Bella knew very well. It was the final stage. It was the stage after which there was no other stage. The doctor gave me 10 months, Constance said. I didn't bargain. I only asked him once more to be certain, and he repeated the same number, and I thanked him, came home, and told no one. Lucas Draycott stood motionless in the middle of the living room. What did you say? He asked. You heard me, Constance said. Since when? Since March. He said nothing. Bella looked at him and saw something it would take her a very long time to understand. The face of a man who had just had the last thing taken from him and was trying to find somewhere to set it down. Constance turned toward Bella. Young lady, she said, I'm going to tell you something, then I'm going to ask you one question, and I won't ask it twice. I have buried every man in my life. I buried my husband when I was 51. I buried my son in 2001. He was 41 years old. She said the number very slowly. 41. My daughter, who took Lucas in and adopted him as her own when he was a toddler before she herself passed away, left me with a grandson to raise, but my son was my only biological child. I have lived 25 years since that day, she said. And in those 25 years there hasn't been a single morning when I didn't out-calculate how old he would be now if he were still alive. Bella remained silent. The old woman looked at her. You think I'm a foolish old woman trying to force two strangers to marry, she said. And I am, but I'm not foolish about what I'm about to say. I have waited 25 years for a child in this house, not because I need an heir. I don't need another person to guard my money. I already have more than enough people doing that. I only want to hear the sound of a child in that hallway before I die. That's all. That is the only thing I still want. Bella felt her throat tighten, and she hated herself for it. Mom, she said, I can't. You can, Constance said. I have an appointment on Sunday. I know you have an appointment on Sunday. I heard you, and now I'm going to tell you this. If you go to that appointment, then this Sunday I will stop taking my medication. All of it, starting today. Bella's head snapped up. Grandmother, Lucas said. Don't. I'm 84 years old, Constance said, never taking her eyes from Bella. I have 10 months. If I stop the medication, I have 3 weeks, perhaps 4. I lose nothing, young lady. That is what people who still have much to lose never understand about those who have nothing left. Bella stood. You can't blackmail me with your life, she said, and her voice trembled, but she finished every word. You don't have the right. If you place that on my shoulders, I will have to carry it for the rest of my life. Do you understand? You could die next week, and I would have to live another 40 years with it. I can, Constance said. I'm very sorry, but I can. It is the only thing I have left to wager, and I am placing it on the table. The room remained silent for a very long time. Bella stood there in a stranger's house in Lake Forest with empty hands, and she thought of her mother, and she thought, Mama, I know what you would say. I know exactly what you would say. You would tell me not to let anyone put a price on me. Then she looked at the old woman sitting there, an 84-year-old woman who had just placed her own life on the table like a final card, and Bella saw something she didn't want to see. She saw desperation. She recognized it immediately because she had worn that same face in a room on the highest floor of the Thornbury Hotel 7 weeks earlier. I won't give you an answer tonight, Bella said. Then she walked into the hallway, closed the door behind her, and stood there in the darkness, and she didn't cry. He found her in the hallway, standing with her back against the wall in the darkness, and he didn't turn on the light. He simply stopped 3 steps away from her and said, We agree on one thing. Bella didn't look up. That child isn't mine, he said. I watched you take the pill. I was standing about 3 feet away, and I watched you swallow it. So whatever performance you want to put on for my grandmother, go ahead, but don't take some other man's child and throw it at my feet. And Bella stood there in the darkness with only one sentence inside her mind, a single sentence resting right behind her lips, something she could have spoken in 2 seconds. You didn't know it was a vitamin. She could say it. She could say it now, and he would ask a doctor, and the doctor would tell him and everything would change. But she looked at his face in the darkness, the face of a man who had already decided what kind of person she was before she ever opened her mouth, and she understood that if she said those words now, they would no longer be the truth. They would only become the second step in a plan. First she had targeted the old woman, then she had revealed the pregnancy, and now she would tell a story about a pill that had been switched. He would listen, nod, and think, very good. People pay screenwriters to write things worse than that. So Bella said nothing. She looked at him and said, Then why are you still standing here? Because my grandmother is going to die, he said. And I have buried enough people this year. Then he told her the terms, and he spoke them the way someone might read from a price list, without pausing, without asking whether she could keep up. 24 months. In public, we are husband and wife. You wear a ring, you accompany me wherever you are required to go. You stand beside me in photographs, and you call my grandmother grandmother. Inside the house there is nothing. No touching, no affection, no questions. You don't ask where I am going. You don't ask whom I am meeting. And you don't ask why people come to the house at 2 o'clock in the morning. You ask nothing. That is the most important condition, and I will say it only once. At the end of 24 months, you leave. Bella heard herself ask, Leave for where? Anywhere you want, he said. $1,800,000 transferred in 4 payments, legal, taxed, documented, and impossible to trace. Along with a clean record, a new driver's license, a new city. Your choice. I have people who handle that. He said it as though he were talking about calling a plumber. Bella felt a chill travel down her spine, not because of the promise, but because of how ordinary his voice sounded when he made it. "And the baby," she said. "That is your concern," he said. "Whether you keep it or not, after 24 months, that is your concern. My grandmother wants to hear the sound of a child in this house before she dies. She will hear it. After that, I don't care." Bella looked at him and thought, he believes every word he has just said. He truly believes it. "There is one more thing," he said. He stepped one pace closer and he didn't raise his voice. He lowered it. And that was when Bella understood why the entire city wrote his name on paper and then burned it. "You will be living in my house," he said. "You will hear things you shouldn't hear. You will see people coming and going. And one day, someone will approach you. That person will be kind. That person will tell you that you are a victim, that none of this is your fault, and that you will be protected. That person will wear a suit and carry a badge inside his jacket." He paused. "If you say one word to that person," he said, "I will not kill you. Do you understand? I don't do things like that. I will make you disappear from your own life. Your accounts will be closed for fraud. Your degree will carry a notation. Every landlord will refuse you. You will still breathe, still walk along the streets, and there will not be a single door anywhere in America that will open for you again. You will still be yourself. You simply won't be anyone anymore." The hallway remained silent, and Bella Kovalchuk, 27 years old, stood there thinking that 7 weeks earlier, she had named a price for one night, and now someone was naming a price for 2 years, and neither time had she truly been the one setting it. Bella didn't go to the appointment on Sunday. She sat in her apartment all that afternoon, with the phone in her hand, and she neither called to cancel nor went, and by 3 o'clock the appointment had passed on its own, and that was how the greatest decision of her life was made. Not by saying yes, but by remaining still. On Tuesday morning, they went to the Daily Center, 11 minutes. No photographs, no flowers, no one with them except Constance and Mr. Brantfett. 3 days later, Bella went to see her landlord to recover her security deposit, because she was moving out, and because $2,400 was still $2,400 to someone who had survived 4 years by thinking that way. Miles Halloran, 56 years old, sat in the small office behind the laundromat he also owned, and he said he couldn't find any record of it. "No receipt, no money," he said. "You took my receipt," Bella said. "You took it when I signed the lease." "Prove it," he said, leaning back in his chair. Then he looked her up and down and said, "But then again, you're a pretty little thing, you know. There are other ways to settle this. Be nice to me, and I'll return all of it. I might even add a little extra." Bella stood, and the office door opened. Lucas Draycott didn't step inside. He only stood in the doorway with his hands still in the pockets of his coat, looking at Miles Halloran the way someone might look at a stain on the ceiling. "Mr. Halloran," he said, "you have 27 cleaning contracts in this city. 3 office buildings in the Loop, 2 hospitals, and 1 hotel chain." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even cross the threshold. "By tomorrow morning you will have 0 contracts," he said. Halloran laughed, a short, uncertain sound. "You can't do that," he said. "I'm not doing anything," Lucas said. "I'm only making phone calls. 4 of them. Then other people will do the rest on their own, and they will do it faster than you think, because everyone is waiting for an excuse to change contractors." Then he turned away and delivered the final sentence without looking back. "That is the most frightening thing about me, Miles. I have never had to do anything." 6 days later, Bella received a transfer of $2,400 accompanied by a handwritten apology. She didn't read the apology. In the building on Wacker Street, news of the marriage spread within 4 hours, and with it came a woman Bella had never met, Portia Ashdown Locke. 33 years old, daughter of the man who had poured $90 million into the corporation, and the woman who, for the past 4 years, had called herself Lucas Draycott's fiancée at every gathering from the Gold Coast to Winnetka, though he had never once confirmed it. She arrived on Thursday afternoon. She didn't scream. She walked directly into the open office area on the 31st floor, stopped in front of Bella's desk, and spoke loudly, very calmly and very clearly. "Would you show me your wrist?" Bella didn't understand. Portia pointed to the watch on Bella's wrist, a Patek Philippe that Constance had given her 2 days earlier, telling her that if she was entering that house, she wouldn't enter it empty-handed. "That belongs to him," Portia said. "I know that watch. I saw it on his wrist in Aspen in 2022. It is a limited edition. There are only 3 in this entire city." She turned toward the room. "We have a thief on the 31st floor," she said. Bella said nothing. She had already learned. Portia seized her wrist, and at that exact moment, Lucas Draycott stepped out of the elevator. He didn't ask what was happening. He looked at Portia's hand gripping Bella's wrist, then looked at Portia and said, "Have I ever reported a missing watch?" Portia released her. "No," she said, "but..." "Then you are telling 20 people in this room that I don't know where my own belongings are," he said. The entire floor fell silent. Portia stood there, and for the first time in 4 years she didn't know where to place her hands. Lucas took Bella's wrist, turned the watch until it sat straight, and he did it slowly, in front of everyone. "This is yours," he said. "My grandmother gave it to you. It belongs to you." Then he released her wrist and said, "And the next time someone touches you, don't call me. Break their hand yourself. Then call me to clean it up." He walked into his office, the door closed, and in the open office area on the 31st floor, 20 people lowered their eyes to their keyboards and pretended to type, while Rhiannon Vespucci, standing at the far end of the room with a file in her hand, didn't look down. She only stared at that door for a very long time, and she didn't blink once. Portia Ashdown Locke came looking for Bella 2 weeks later, not in the open office area, but inside the women's restroom on the 31st floor, where there were no cameras. She wasn't angry. That was what made it frightening. She stood beside the sink, touched up her lipstick, and spoke to the mirror. "I don't hate you," she said. "I want you to understand that. At your age, dreaming is perfectly normal. Everyone goes through that phase." Bella washed her hands and didn't answer. "But I'm very good at reading contracts," Portia said. "That is what I do. I have been reading contracts since I was 22, and I have never missed a single clause. My father poured $90 million into the building you are standing in. 90 million, Miss Kovalchuk. Do you know what that means? It means I am not going anywhere. You have a ring, you have a watch, you have the old woman. I have the balance sheet." Then she closed her lipstick and smiled at herself in the mirror. 2 years passed very quickly, she said. Then she walked out. Bella remained there and felt her blood turn cold because Portia had named the exact number. 2 years. No one knew that number. No one except Bella, Lucas, Constance, and Mr. Brantvet. By the 16th week, Bella began to feel better. The nausea had passed, and she could eat again. And she had begun resting a hand over her stomach in the evenings without realizing she was doing it. And she hated herself for that, because she had promised herself she wouldn't become attached, that this was a contract and she would leave after 24 months, and that she wouldn't carry anything inside her that could hurt her. She had lost that battle sometime around the 13th week, and she knew it. At 9 o'clock on Tuesday night, Bella was the only person left on the 31st floor. The desk phone rang. Vespucci's voice was perfectly calm. "Miss Kovalchuk, I need the port transaction records for the 3rd quarter of 2019. Paper copies. There are no digital files. They are in B3. Bella looked at the clock. "Right now. The federal auditors need them by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning," Vespucci said. "If Mr. Draycott is delayed because of you, you can explain it to him yourself." B3 was the 3rd basement level. Bella had never been down there. The elevator only went as far as B2, and from there she had to walk along a windowless concrete corridor nearly 200 feet long, where motion-sensitive lights came on section by section as she passed and went dark behind her, and she would remember very clearly the sound of her shoes echoing against the low ceiling. At the end of the corridor stood a steel door with a small sign reading 39 degrees Fahrenheit. Cold Server Archive. Her access card opened it. That was the first thing that felt strange, later, when she had time to think back. The access card of an entry-level compliance analyst shouldn't have opened that door. Inside, it was so cold that her breath turned to mist immediately. Metal shelving rose to the ceiling, filled with document boxes, and the cooling system produced a deep, continuous hum. She found the 3rd quarter of 2019 on the 4th shelf. She pulled out 3 boxes. Then the door closed. There was no slam. That was the worst part. It simply slid shut, very softly, followed by a small beep, and the indicator light on the frame changed from green to red. Upstairs in the server room, the remote override command had just finished processing, locking the door from the outside. The moment the sensors registered her entry, Bella set the boxes down and went to the door. There was no handle on the inside, only a card reader. She swiped her card. Red light. She swiped again. Red light. She swiped a third time, a fourth, a fifth, and her hands began to tremble, and she couldn't tell whether it was from the cold or from the thing rising inside her chest. She took out her phone. There was no signal, not a single bar. "Is anyone there?" she called. She struck the steel door with her palm. "Is anyone out there, please?" The sound of her pounding died inside the concrete wall, more than 3 feet thick, and went nowhere, and she knew that after the second blow, but she kept pounding because there was nothing else to do. No one would arrive for another 7 hours. She calculated the number, and she wished she hadn't. The cleaning shift came at 4 o'clock in the morning, 7 hours at 39 degrees Fahrenheit. Bella sat on the floor between 2 rows of shelves, pulled her coat tightly around herself, and tried to remember what she knew. Don't fall asleep. Keep moving. She stood. She walked around the room. She completed 40 laps before losing count. After about an hour, she could no longer feel her fingertips. After about 2 hours, she stopped shivering, and she knew enough to understand that not shivering was not a good sign. She sat down for the final time, placed both hands over her stomach, and spoke aloud in the empty room, her breath forming white mist before her face. "Is anyone there?" Then her voice grew quieter. "Baby, baby, I'm sorry. I was going to let you go, but now I don't want to anymore. I don't want to anymore. I swear to you, I don't want to anymore. I just need you to wait for me a little while. Just wait for me a little while. All right, baby." Then she closed her eyes. At 11:20 that night, Lucas Draycott arrived home in Lake Forest and found the house dark. Doreen told him Bella hadn't returned. He called her. The phone rang once before going to voicemail. And that was the first thing that was wrong, because a phone going to voicemail after a single ring meant there was no signal, not that no one was answering. He called the building's security department. The officer on duty said Miss Kovalchuk's card had been used to leave the 31st floor at 9:12, but it had never been used to exit through the lobby. That meant she was still inside the building. She had been there for 3 hours. Lucas Draycott said nothing more. He went back to the car. On the way into the city, he called the head of security and gave him one instruction. "Check every use of her access card during the past 4 hours and read them to me in order." The man read them aloud. 31st floor at 9:12, B2 at 9:15, B3 cold storage room door 9:18, then silence, and after that Lucas asked. The man said, "There is nothing after that, sir." At 11:44, Lucas Draycott stepped out of the elevator on B2 and walked down that concrete corridor, nearly 200 feet long, while the motion-sensitive lights came on section by section ahead of him. And he moved very quickly, but he didn't run, because he hadn't run in 25 years. The door was locked. The indicator was red. The head of security hurried behind him, breathing hard, saying that if the magnetic lock had failed, they would have to wait for a technician, that they needed a code, that they had to call the company that installed it. And Lucas Draycott didn't hear a single word. He had stood before a door that wouldn't open once before in his life. He had been 12 years old. He had been sitting in the back seat, and the door had jammed, and he had beaten against that window until his hands no longer looked like hands. And in the front seat there had been 2 people he couldn't save. And for the next 25 years, he had made himself one promise, that no one would ever again be left inside a sealed box while he stood on the other side. "Fire extinguisher," he said. "Give me the fire extinguisher." They handed it to him. "The hinges," he said. "Strike the hinges." At 11:52, the steel door on B3 tore free from the top of its frame, and Lucas Draycott stepped into a room at 39 degrees Fahrenheit. She was sitting between 2 rows of shelves, her back resting against the leg of a metal rack, her head tilted to one side, and she wasn't shivering. He knew immediately what that meant. He dropped to his knees. He didn't call her name. He only slid one arm beneath her back and the other beneath her knees, then lifted her, and she was so light that it made him angry in a way he had no name for. "Don't close your eyes," he said. Her eyes were already drifting shut. "Look at me," he said. There was no response, and then Lucas Draycott, who had never raised his voice at anyone in his life because he had never needed to, shouted in that concrete corridor, and his voice struck the walls and came back from 3 directions. "Look at me. You are not dying in my building." Her eyes opened to a narrow slit. She looked at him without recognizing him and said something so softly that he had to bend close to hear it, and what she said was, "Baby." That was all. "Baby." Then she slipped away again. He carried her the entire length of that nearly 200-foot corridor, through the elevator ride, and he didn't put her down when the ambulance arrived. He climbed inside with her, and there, among the people in reflective uniforms cutting the sleeves from her clothes, he sat motionless and watched the thermometer they placed in her ear. 93.6 degrees Fahrenheit. They reached Northwestern Memorial Hospital at 12:21. Dr. Quinn Abernathy arrived 15 minutes later. Moderate hypothermia. They warmed Bella with thermal blankets and heated intravenous fluids, and at the 40th minute, they found the baby's heartbeat. Dr. Abernathy stepped into the corridor and said to the man waiting there, "The baby is still all right, and she is going to be all right. 2 more hours, and I wouldn't be able to tell you that." Lucas Draycott asked nothing else. He took out his phone, called the head of security, and said, "The access card that opened B3 tonight. I want to know where it is." They initiated a full system forensic audit at 3 o'clock in the morning. By afternoon, the IT security report came back. The digital lock on B3 had been overridden remotely from the main server room on the 31st floor at 9:18, disguised as a routine system update. The override panel in the server room, which required physical access, was dusted for prints. There were 2 sets of prints on the lock's manual lever. One belonged to the technician on duty. The other belonged to Rhiannon Vespucci. Rhiannon Vespucci was summoned to the 32nd floor office at 7 o'clock on Friday evening. She arrived exactly on time. She wore a gray suit, her hair tied neatly back, and she sat in the chair across from him without waiting to be invited, while Lucas Draycott placed the fingerprint report on the desk, turned it toward her, and said nothing. She read it. She read slowly, through the entire page, including the notes at the bottom. Then she looked up, and she smiled. That was what he would remember most clearly afterward, not the smile itself, but the fact that in 4 years he had never once seen this woman smile. "What are you going to do to me?" she asked. Her voice was ordinary. "Are you going to make me disappear from my own life?" "That's the line you like to use, isn't it?" "I like that line very much. It sounds exactly like you." Lucas Draycott didn't move. "Go ahead," Vespucci said. Then she lifted one hand and unfastened the second button of her blouse. It wasn't a seductive gesture. She did it the way someone might open the lid of a box. Inside, secured to the lining of her blouse with medical tape, was a small flat black device, no larger than a credit card. "Agent Winslow is listening, Mr. Draycott," she said. "Good evening." The room fell silent. He didn't stand. He didn't reach for the phone. He only sat there while the past 4 years rearranged themselves inside his mind from the beginning. Every meeting she had attended, every file that had passed through her hands, every time she had asked to stay late. "How long?" he asked. 2 years and 7 months, Vespucci said. "They caught me for tax fraud, $400,000. I had 2 choices, 30 months in federal prison or the chair outside your office. I chose the chair. Don't take it personally. You aren't that special. Everyone chooses the chair." "You locked her in there," Lucas said. Vespucci didn't deny it. That was what Lucas Draycott would remember for the rest of his life. She didn't deny a single word. "We have 19 months of recordings of you," she said. "Do you know what we have in them? Nothing. You never speak. You never threaten anyone. You never give anyone an order. You sit in a room and other people understand on their own. There isn't a single sentence we can take into court. Agent Winslow told me the only way was to make you angry. People tell the truth when they are angry." "So you needed a reason," Lucas said. "I needed a reason," Vespucci said, and she looked directly at him and spoke the next sentence without the slightest tremor. "I thought you would find her at 4 o'clock in the morning. I thought she would be cold, that she would cry, that she would spend 1 day in the hospital, and I thought you would lose your temper and call someone and say the one sentence I had waited 2 years and 7 months to hear. You arrived 4 hours earlier than I calculated. That was my mistake." Lucas Draycott stood. He walked to the window and remained there for a very long time, and when he turned back, there was nothing on his face. "Did you know she was pregnant?" he asked. Vespucci didn't answer at once. "No," she said. He nodded. Then he pressed the intercom button and said, "Send Miss Ashdown lock up." Portia arrived 4 minutes later, and she entered the office and saw Vespucci sitting there with 2 buttons of her blouse undone and the black device attached to the lining, and her face turned white. "Portia," Lucas said, "how long have you known?" She opened her mouth. "Don't," he said. "Don't say the first thing you were going to say. Say the second." Portia stood there for 3 seconds. "Since March," she said. 4 months, Lucas said. You sat on my board for 4 months, and you knew. You are going to prison, Portia said, and her voice broke, and for the first time in 4 years she looked exactly 33 years old. You are going to prison, and I will have to hold this company together. I calculated everything. I prepared everything. My father had. You allowed a pregnant woman to be locked inside a room at 39 degrees Fahrenheit to protect your seat, Lucas said. I didn't know she was pregnant, Portia shouted. You didn't ask, Lucas said. That is already an answer. Portia Ashdown Locke left the Draycott Board of Directors on Monday morning. Her father's $90 million was repaid in full, with interest, within 6 weeks, and every contract bearing the Locke name was terminated. She moved to Palm Beach in September and never returned to Chicago. The final thing she said to an acquaintance at O'Hare Airport was, I used to think I belonged here. It turns out I was only renting space. Rhiannon Vespucci, however, still came to work on Monday. No one arrested her. No one fired her. She remained in that same chair for another 4 months, and the entire building knew and no one said a word, because Lucas Draycott had ordered everyone to leave her alone, and that was the only part of this entire affair that no one could understand. Dr. Quinn Abernathy arrived at the building on Wacker Street on Wednesday afternoon, without an appointment, and she told the receptionist that she would sit there until Mr. Draycott had 10 minutes. She waited for 2 hours and 40 minutes. When she entered his office, she didn't sit down. Mr. Draycott, she said, I need to ask you a medical question concerning my patient, and I have her written consent. You have 10 minutes. Lucas Draycott nodded toward the chair. She still didn't sit. She opened her phone, placed it on the desk, and on the screen was a photograph of a blister pack. My patient described a pill to me, she said. White, round, small, no larger than a pea. I have shown her 11 photographs over the past 3 months, and she stopped at this one. Do you recognize it? Lucas Draycott looked down at the screen, and something in that room changed. This is folic acid, he said. 400 micrograms. Dr. Abernathy said nothing. My grandmother has made me take one of these every morning since I was 20, he said, and his voice slowed, like a man descending a staircase in the dark. She doesn't trust doctors. She says doctors only know how to prescribe medicine after people are already sick. She believes in vitamins. She buys them by the case. She leaves a blister pack in every bedside drawer of every house I have ever lived in, including the hotel rooms I regularly rent. She has done that for 20 years, and I have never told her that I don't take them. You gave her one of these, Dr. Abernathy said. Lucas Draycott didn't answer Mr. Draycott. The top drawer, he said, the bedside cabinet. He spoke to the surface of the desk rather than to her. I was drunk. I had finished half a bottle before she arrived. I opened the top drawer. That is where I always kept it. He stopped. I opened the wrong drawer, he said. Dr. Abernathy picked up her phone. Then, sir, she said, and there wasn't the slightest trace of satisfaction in her voice. That child is yours. She walked out. The door closed, and Lucas Draycott remained sitting in that room until darkness had completely fallen, and he didn't turn on the light. 4 days later, the results of the prenatal paternity test arrived. A laboratory in Naperville, no name attached, payment routed through 3 intermediaries. The results mailed to a post office box for which only he had the key. Probability of paternity, 99.9%. He read the number 3 times. Then he turned to the second page of the attached ultrasound report, the page Dr. Abernathy had included because she knew he would need it, and there was a line of notes he had to read twice before he understood. Twins. 2 fetuses. 1 boy and 1 girl. 18 weeks. Lucas Draycott sat in his car in the underground parking garage and didn't start the engine for 40 minutes. He thought about that night at the Thornbury Hotel, and about the sentence he had spoken to her while she was still standing in the doorway with a stack of towels in her arms. I know exactly what you really came here for. He thought about how he had told her not to cling. He thought about his grandmother's living room, about how he had stood there and asked how much my grandmother paid you. He thought about the dark hallway, and how he had said, "Don't bring some other man's child and throw it at my feet," and he thought about how she had stood there in the darkness and hadn't answered him with a single word. She had known. He understood that while sitting in that car, and it made it difficult for him to breathe. She had known since the day at the hospital. She had known for the past 4 months, and she had sat across from him at dinner, accompanied him to 3 social events, worn the ring he gave her, and never said a word. because she knew that if she spoke, it would only sound like the next step in a plan. I called her a gold digger, he thought. I made her sign a contract requiring her to leave after 24 months. I wrote, in black ink on white paper, the clause that forced my own children to leave my house, and I read it aloud to her like a price list, and she listened to every word. He didn't go home that night. He drove to Lake Forest close to 1 o'clock in the morning, stood in the second-floor hallway outside her bedroom door, and remained there for about 3 minutes. Then he went downstairs. He didn't knock. He didn't wake her. He sat in the living room until morning with the report in his hands, and he didn't say a single word to her for the next 9 days. On the 10th day, he placed the report on the dining table in front of her. Bella looked at it and didn't need to open it. She had already waited 9 days. "Why didn't you tell me?" he said. And something inside Bella Kovalchuk, something that had been pressed down for 4 months, for the 7 weeks before that, and for the 4 years before that, finally broke open. "Tell you what," she said. "What exactly was I supposed to tell you? That you were right to pay me but wrong to think I was cheap. When did you want me to say it? When you stood in your grandmother's living room and asked how much she had paid me? Or when you stood in that dark hallway and told me not to throw some other man's children at your feet?" He said nothing. "I became pregnant from a night when I sold myself so I could bury my mother," she said. "Do you think I'm proud of that? Do you think I sat there waiting for some beautiful day when I could announce it to you? The very first night, you told me not to cling. You handed me a pill, called it medicine, and asked whether I wanted trouble, and I swallowed it, and I didn't ask. I didn't ask a single question, because people like me don't have the right to ask. Then when I became pregnant, you were certain the children weren't yours. You were so certain that you wrote it into the contract. 24 months, then leave. $1,800,000. A clean record, a new city, your choice. Do you know what voice you used when you read that to me? The voice you used to read an elevator price list." "Bella," he said. "I was going to leave," she said, and her voice broke, but she didn't stop. "I had calculated everything. At the end of 24 months, I was going to take my 2 children and go as far away from this city as I could, and I would never trouble your life for another second. I had even chosen the name I would use." "Who gave you permission?" he said. Bella stopped. "What? Who gave you permission to take my children away?" he said. He said it very softly. Bella stood there and couldn't find any air in the room. "I thought you were like everyone else," he said. "My whole life, I have only met people who came near me with a plan. I was 12 years old when lawyers came to me and said they only wanted to help. So when you walked into that room, I knew immediately what kind of person you were. I knew before you even opened your mouth, and I was wrong. I was wrong from the very first second, and it took me 4 months to understand because I am a fool. But you never had a plan. You only had a bill for $49,200. He looked at her. "Liars don't remember the uneven numbers," he said. "I knew that the very first night, and I still chose to believe the easier thing." He stood. "I accept responsibility," he said. "Not because of my grandmother, not because of the Draycott name, because they are my children and you are my wife." "On paper," Bella said. "Then we tear up the paper," he said. And Bella Kovalchuk stood there, 27 years old and 18 weeks pregnant, in the dining room of a house in Lake Forest, that she still couldn't bring herself to call home, and she couldn't say anything, because in all her life, no one had ever offered to tear up a piece of paper for her. She was about to open her mouth. Then the doorbell rang. Doreen went to answer it. They heard her say something, then the sound of a woman's voice, then Doreen speaking louder. "Miss, you can't simply..." And the dining room door opened. There were 3 people. A lawyer in a navy suit, a man carrying a briefcase, and between them stood a young woman of about 28, with brown hair and a cream-colored wool coat, holding herself very straight. She looked at Lucas Draycott and didn't blink. Constance appeared in the opposite doorway, leaning on her cane, and froze. "Who are you?" Lucas said. The woman drew in a breath. "I am Linnea," she said. "Linnea Ashgrove Draycott. I am Wendell Draycott's daughter." No one spoke. "I am your sister," she said. "I survived the explosion in Gary, Indiana in November of 2001. Constance released her cane. It struck the hardwood floor, and no one picked it up. The lawyer placed a thick file on the table. Optom papers from Arizona, hospital records from 2001. An old photograph. Constance sat down very slowly and didn't touch the file. She only looked at the woman standing there. My little girl had a scar on her left elbow, she said. She fell down the stairs when she was 4. Linnea pulled up her sleeve. The skin was smooth. I had it removed, she said. Laser treatment, in Scottsdale, in 2020. I have the receipt if you need it. Constance nodded slowly. Then she said, and she was allergic to peanuts. Grade 3. I had to use an EpiPen on her twice before she turned 3. Once at home, once at an ice cream shop on Michigan Street. Linnea didn't blink. I underwent desensitization treatment, she said. 4 years in Phoenix. I can eat them now. My doctor can confirm it. Constance remained still for a very long time. Then she called, Doreen, bring out the plate of cookies from this morning. Doreen brought in a plate of round cookies, still warm, and set it in the middle of the table. Constance pushed it toward Linnea. Eat one, child, she said. And Linnea looked at the plate, then at the old woman, and she picked one up and took a bite. Then a second bite. She finished the entire cookie, smiled, and said, It's delicious, grandmother. The whole room was silent. Then a very soft voice came from the far end of the table. Grandmother, Bella said, those cookies don't contain peanuts. Everyone turned toward her. I watched Doreen make them this morning, Bella said. I was sitting in the kitchen drinking tea. She used almond butter. The second cookie was still in Linnea's hand. She didn't move. Constance placed both hands on the tabletop. Young woman, she said, and her voice had changed completely, becoming something Lucas Draycott had heard only twice in his life. You just sat here and ate something you believed could kill you. You swallowed it, just to keep your place in this house. Linnea set the cookie down. But that isn't the worst part, Constance said. The worst part is that you didn't ask. You didn't ask what kind of cookie it was. My granddaughter would ask. She would ask before she picked it up. She would ask at every meal, in every restaurant, in every house, for the rest of her life, until the day she died, because that is what a child with a grade 3 allergy has to do every single day to stay alive. You can't remove that with a laser, young woman. That lives in the bones. Linnea said nothing. The lawyer began saying something about his client's rights, and Lucas Draycott didn't let him finish. A DNA test, he said. Now, in this house, Dr. Quinn Abernathy arrived 40 minutes later. She took cheek swabs from Linnea and Constance, labeled them, and left. 48 hours. No one in that house slept. On Friday afternoon, Dr. Abernathy returned with an envelope. She opened it in the middle of the living room and read it aloud because Constance had asked her to. Probability of a second-degree biological relationship between sample A and sample B, she said. None. 0%. Not negligible. None. She has no biological relationship to Mrs. Draycott. Linnea stood so quickly that she knocked over her chair. This is wrong, she said. Do it again. Her lawyer had already begun gathering the papers into his briefcase, and he did it with the speed of a man who had realized he wouldn't be paid the remainder of his fee. Constance didn't look at Linnea. She looked out the window, and Dr. Quinn Abernathy was still standing there, holding the results in her hand, and she didn't leave. She was rereading the second page, the page no one had asked her to read, and she read it a second time. Then a third. Mr. Draycott, she said. No one heard her, Mr. Draycott. She said again, louder, and there was something in her voice that made the entire room turn toward her. What is it? Lucas asked. Dr. Abernathy looked down at the page. The laboratory ran a crossmatch, she said. Under the long-standing, active search authorization and DNA database request that Mrs. Draycott signed years ago with our hospital group, we are flagged to cross-reference any matching lineage. I submitted the request as part of that protocol. She paused. There is another sample in the system that shows a second-degree biological match with Constance Draycott, indicating a grandmother and grandchild relationship, she said. Constance turned her head very slowly. Which sample? She asked. Dr. Quinn Abernathy looked up, and she didn't look at the old woman. She looked toward the far end of the table, where a 27-year-old woman sat with both hands resting on her stomach. The sample I collected last week, she said, for the prenatal test. Pastor Elias Burkhart came to Lake Forest on Tuesday morning, carrying a yellowed paper envelope, and he placed it on the table and said, She gave this to me 25 years ago, and told me to wait until you were strong enough, and I believe today is that day. Inside was a linen handkerchief, embroidered in one corner with faded blue thread, 3 letters, Ashgrove D, and a handwritten note in Ukrainian. He read it aloud to them. November of 2001, Interstate 90. Outside Gary, Indiana, around 10 o'clock at night. Helena Kovalchuk, 39 years old, a night shift nursing aide at a retirement home, was driving home. A car had exploded half a mile away. There were fire trucks, police officers, people running. And on the roadside, about a quarter of a mile from the scene, standing alone in the darkness, was a little girl around 3 years old, who couldn't speak a single word. Helena stopped. That was all she did. She stopped. She took the child to a small police station in Hammond, filed a report, left her name and phone number, and was told the search was focused on the larger hospitals to the north, and that someone would contact her. 3 weeks, then 3 months, then 3 years. No one came. In the note she had written, the child had nothing with her except this handkerchief. I don't know whether Ashgrove is her name, someone else's name, or the name of the store that sold the handkerchief. I will call her Bella, because she is the only beautiful thing I found on that roadside. Constance listened to the entire letter, and she didn't cry. She waited until the pastor had finished reading, then said, I know that station. I passed it 4 times that November. I saw the sign. And I didn't stop, because I thought my granddaughter had to be in a better hospital than that. I searched for her at Northwestern, at Rush, at Mayo. I hired 3 detective agencies. I offered a reward of $2 million for 11 years. And all that time, she was living in a 2-room apartment in Ukrainian village, eating borscht and studying accounting on a scholarship. She looked at Bella. I was wrong for 25 years, she said. Don't call me grandmother yet. I haven't earned it. 2 weeks later, the Federal Bureau of Investigation raided the building on Wacker Street at 6 o'clock in the morning. Agent Theodora Winslow had a search warrant and an arrest warrant for Lucas Draycott on charges of money laundering and federal transportation fraud. Constance Draycott, 84 years old, was sitting in the conference room on the 32nd floor with a leather briefcase in front of her. She pushed it toward Agent Winslow. You have the wrong person, young lady, she said. The signature on every transfer order from 2003 through 2019 is mine, not my grandson's. He began signing in 2019, and he signed whatever I placed in front of him. You want the biggest fish. She is sitting right here. She is 84 years old, and she has 10 months left to live. Lucas Draycott stood frozen at the far end of the room. Later, when only the 2 of them remained, she said to him, You were 12 when your father died. I had 2 choices. Let this fall into the hands of people who would devour you, or take control of it myself and place you in front as the shadow. I turned you into the man whose name this entire city writes on paper and then burns, so no one would have time to notice that you were only a child who survived inside a car. The greatest crime of my life wasn't the money. It was what I did to you. I don't need you to forgive me. I only need you to live past 41. She pleaded guilty under an agreement with federal prosecutors, cooperated fully with the investigation, and because of her end-stage heart failure, the court postponed her sentence and placed her under electronic monitoring at home. She died in her own house 11 months later, with a monitoring bracelet around her ankle. Lucas Draycott received a non-prosecution agreement in exchange for transforming the entire corporation into a transparent entity, accepting 5 years of federal oversight, and establishing a compensation fund. Linnea was prosecuted for federal identity fraud. In Bella's 34th week, she went into premature labor. Lucas held her hand the entire time and said, I sat inside a burning car and walked out. I have never begged anyone for anything in my life. Now I am begging. A boy named Hallen, a girl named Connie. At the cemetery behind St. Nicholas Church, Bella knelt and said, Mama, I know what you would say. You would say, Belaka, you aren't that cheap. I'm not cheap, Mama. I was only desperate, and desperation isn't a crime. Lucas knelt beside her and said, Mom, I am the man who humiliated your daughter with money on the worst night of her life. I am not asking you to forgive me. I am only promising one thing. No one will ever put a price on her again, not even me. Constance laid down her flowers and said very softly, Helena, you raised my granddaughter on what I spent on a single dinner, and you raised her better than I ever raised my own son. You are the one who won. At 6:41 on a September morning, beside that same wall of glass and that same gray lake, Lucas Draycott stood bare from the waist up, holding a cup of coffee. Bella walked up behind him. You counted, didn't you? She said. He laughed softly. The doors. You were counting the ways out. He remained silent for a long moment. No, he said. Not this morning. You traded whiskey for coffee, she said. Someone told me I had to live past 41, he said. What would have happened if you hadn't been drunk that night? She asked. He turned and looked directly at her. Then I wouldn't have seen you, he said. and I would have gone through my whole life without knowing what I had walked past. So you are grateful for being drunk? No, he said. I am ashamed of it every day. That is why I am still here. Shame without change is only self-pity. Change is what makes it atonement. He handed her the coffee. And for the first time in her life, Bella Kovalchuk didn't count the doors. This story leaves behind one very simple truth. Bella didn't become worthy of respect on the day people discovered her real family name. She had been worthy of respect from the very night she walked into that room carrying a stack of towels. Blood doesn't give a human being value. Kindness does. The woman who won in this story wasn't the richest or the most powerful. She was a night shift nursing aide who stopped her car beside the road for a child who wasn't hers. She had no money, no power, nothing at all. She had only one thing. She didn't walk away. And in life, the person who stays is always the one who wins. What about you? What do you think about this story? Have you ever been given a price because of your circumstances? Or have you ever been the person who stopped for a stranger? Leave a comment below. We truly want to hear what you feel deep in your heart. If this story touched you, please press like, share it with someone you believe needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more compelling stories every day. We wish everyone watching this video good health, a joyful life, and peace in every day ahead. Goodbye, and we will see you again in the next video.